Hi there, my name is Jim Jepson with the Arizona Health Zone in conjunction with the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension Service, Pinal County. And today what we're going to do is talk about how to set up a gardening water system for basically an at-home garden, a community garden, a school garden, however you want to make your garden. What we're going to do is I'm just going to show you bits and pieces and put them together just by hand, nothing major, but just by hand so that you can see how it's done. But first of all, like we all have at our homes, we've got a faucet. That's the main thing. You have to make sure that you have a water source. In this case, we're using a 3/4 inch faucet, and with our handle, back and forth, like that, back and forth. So basically, when it's open, your handle is like that, your faucet is open. When it's turned to the side, it's closed. So what we'll do is we'll just leave it closed for right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on a timer onto this hose bib, basically. But instead of, and this is my timer. There's a lot of different kind of timers that you can get out there from the big box stores, from your at-home nursery, different garden centers, that kind of thing. But you don't really want to connect your timer to your hose bib and have it stick out like that, because basically somebody could walk into it and break it pretty easily that way. So what I've done is I've got this little coupler extension, which basically has a little 45-degree angle down from your hose bib. So what we're going to do is we're going to hook that on here, just screw it on. And this, I'm using all 3/4 inch parts and pieces today for this system, with the exception of one, and I'll note that. So, okay, so here's our hose bib coming out of the wall, or on top of a pipe coming out of the ground, and basically we've hooked on the extension with the 45. So now what we can do is we can take our timer and we just hook that on. And inside the timer, there's a little mesh screen which helps to filter out a lot of the impurities, sand, and whatever might happen to get through your water system. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to screw that on here also. Okay, so basically we've got it. This is simple, but you see how it's basically coming out of a wall, and it can be pretty snugged up to a wall, so it's not sticking out to cause any kind of a hazard. So now that's what our timer looks like. Anyway, I've got this coupler here, and I hook it onto our timer, just like this, okay? And what this is this will allow me to take this piece, which is called a backflow. And in this case, this is a backflow with a pressure regulator. Sometimes a backflow does not have a pressure regulator, but there is one built in here. So basically, this little gizmo is a pressure regulator that, again, you can buy at any of the nurseries or big box stores or a plumbing supply or what have you. And if that's the case, that your backflow does not have a pressure regulator, you can actually put this piece in. You just screw that in here, just like that, which is threaded at the bottom. And then we take, and you always hook up your backflow valve like this. This part is always facing down, and there's an arrow on it that tells you how to put it. So basically what we want to do then is we want to hook this up. There again, if you do not have a pressure regulator within your backflow device. So basically, this is your system getting started, okay? Now, I'm gonna back up just a little bit and talk about the backflow. And for you that don't know what that means, backflow is there's a siphoning action. The water, basically, you turn on your hose bib and the water, because of the pressure in the pipes, comes out. But when you turn that off, there could be a suction or a backflow, which could cause that water to go back into the city system. That is, if you have a city system. And so that part you don't want to have. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our backflow here. And the reason that we put that on here is actually there's regulations within different communities to have a backflow. on your water device. If you're like a in-home sprinkler, a garden setup, irrigation system, whatever. And the reason being is that basically because of the water pressure in the lines that's provided to you by the city, or if you even have a well system, you've got a pressurized tank so that you can have water in your home to take a shower, you know, wash your pots and pans and things like that. But you've got pressure, but a lot of times when you turn that pressure off, there's a quick backflow. And sometimes what it can do is it can suck water back up through the system, and there might be some contaminants that had gotten on that water or into the water, and it goes back up into the system and then gets back into the main water supply, and whatever contaminants there are, they can be moved on down to your next door neighbor. So that's the purpose of the backflow. Okay, so here as a recap, what we did is we have a hose bit coming out of the wall. We've got our 45 down because we don't want to have our timer sticky sort of at an angle where it can get broken. We have a timer that's been hooked onto that. And then below we actually have a coupler, and then we have a backflow device to keep the water from going back into our public water system. Now also this backflow has got a pressure regulator, because with the pressure of our water, it can actually blow out our drip tubes, and we'll be getting to that in just a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is from here, I'm actually going to take this, well no, I'm going to just leave it like that, but we're going to do it from an angle. Actually what I have is I have a 3/4 inch threaded coupler here, and I'm going to put that at the end of our backflow valve. And then now this is where you can figure out whatever it is that you want to do to make your system go for a garden irrigation system. What I do is I put a main frame down into the ground using 3/4 inch PVC Schedule 40 pipe so that I have a good water flow into my garden. But a lot of times I don't like to use all of the parts and pieces needed, like a 90 and a 45 and this and that. So basically what I do is I get this flex tubing, and this is the one part that is a 1/2 inch. So this is a threaded coupler that is reducing down to a 1/2 inch. So basically what I can do is I put this in here just like that. So, and it's really cool because it's PVC, but it's flexible. All right. So basically, let's say that now we've got our system, we've got it set up, and let's say our ground level is about right here. Okay. So here we have this flex tubing, because you want to make sure that you put your main tubing, which basically is this 3/4 inch Schedule 40 hard plastic PVC. This is the main part where we use the PVC to transport the water throughout the whole garden to the end of the system. So basically what I'm going to do from here is this would be hooked up with another coupler, sort of like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to unscrew this really quick. And basically what we have is we still have this coupler, and it is going to go right on just like that. Okay, and this is coming from our water source. So now what I'm going to do real quick, and basically what we're doing is we're just doing the main frame of the irrigation system, and then in a little bit we're going to talk about the above ground system that you'll actually have on your garden bed. So what I have right here is this is pipe cutters, okay, PVC pipe cutters. So you pull them apart and your blade flips back, and then it's got a clicking sound. So let's say that we'll have it pre-measured, and I'm just going to do a guess at about 18 inches, okay? So what I'm going to do, and we're going to say that this is the center of the garden bed that we're going to plant underground, let's say that way. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this pipe. It's kind of crooked, but I'll tell you what. I'm going to cut the pipe, and then what I have is I have a tube, a PVC tube, and we put it back together. And yes, I did cut it kind of crooked, but we can kind of fix that with a tube. So Normally what I would do is I would use a PVC primer, which is purple, and you put around inside of our tea and also on the tube. And that preps it for the glue that I also put on there, and then we put our PVC tubing together. We're not actually going to do that today, but I'm just sticking it together just to show you. But actually they also have a primer and glue in one, and I do like to do that because a lot of times in the garden you tend to leave one or it gets knocked over, this and that. So I just use one type with a combination of both. So anyhow, so I've got my tea, and my tea is also threaded inside, and it's reduced to a 1/2 inch here also. So then what I'm going to do is this will be the next part of the transfer part of the underground system. And from here with this tea, I take our barbed fitting. This is called a barbed fitting. And as you can see, there's little ridges on it. There's little barbs. And this will screw right down into our 3/4 inch PVC. Now the reason that we're doing this is because from this barbed fitting, we're going to be taking a 17 millimeter solid drip tubing, so meaning it does not have any holes. And so this is going to go from underground to up and over into the outside. So once we get this system done, and then we get our drip tubing or our solid tubing put on this barbed fitting, then we can actually start covering up our main distribution system. All right, so here we are with our main distribution system, our water provider that's going to be underground. I've got a 3/4 inch plastic PVC. I put in a T, and now I have a barbed fitting that's gone into the T. And one thing that I did not happen to mention is that whenever we're putting our fittings in, as long as we've got a thread, which I think everybody knows that there's threads on these fittings, is we use what's called Teflon tape or plumber's tape. And basically it's just a very thin little piece of plastic that goes around your threads. And basically what that is it seals. It's a sealer without being tacky or gluey, gooey. It's a sealer so that you don't have any drips or leaks between this 3/4 inch threaded T and the bottom of this barbed fitting. So basically there we are. So, and you can see there's a little bit of a light of the Teflon tape sticking out. So now what we're going to do, this is our main system that's underground. So what we're going to do, as I mentioned earlier, is we use 17 millimeter solid drip tubing we use it as our riser coming out of the ground to our garden bed. So what I do is you can use just a pair of heavy-duty scissors or pruning shears or whatever, something that'll cut. And basically, it's usually measured out. I'm not going to do it this time, but it just depends on how deep the main water system is into the ground. So, and naturally, your tubing has a curve because it's been coiled up for a long time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a piece of this using the shears. Very easy, especially when it's cool, okay? Because when it's relatively hard, solid. So this is what I'm going to do. I've got this little piece, and actually when we have our tubing in the ground, I kind of tend to want to put this barbed fitting at an angle. So basically, sort of like this, but in the ground right in front of my seed bed. The reason being is because now I'm going to place this piece of tubing onto the barbed fitting, and you can see it's going to come up with this curve, and then you're up on top of the seed bed. And then if you have to do any trimming of this tubing, you can do that later after you aerate your main water system. So I'm just going to show you a little trick that I learned from one of our extension agents a number of years ago. Is I used to try to muscle this onto a barbed fitting, and you can do it, but it's hard because this plastic is hard. But what I have is I've got this little butane torch here, and again, you can get this at any hardware store or an automotive store, a big box store, whatever. But what I do is I just click my button a couple of times right on the end. You can see the flame coming out, and it'll give you a little bit of a shiny look to it. I don't know if you can see the difference in it, but just that amount of heat has basically softened this tubing to where I can take it and I can push it right over. Whoops, my barb fitting is loose. So you still have to put a little muscle into it, because if you do it get your tubing too soft, then it's going to bend and get really and all messed up. So now the heat expanded the tubing, it got it soft, so now I've got it pushed over the barb, and now as it cools, it contracts, and it's come back together, and it contracts over those barbs, and now you can't get it off. So if you had to take this off, you're basically going to have to use your torch again and really soften it up, and then you can get it off that way. But then you'll have to cut your tube or get a whole new set there. So, and now what I'm going to do is basically, let's say now we're going to bury this. So now we've got this sticking out, okay? And we're going up to our seed bed. So what I have is, this is a little 17 millimeter valve, and I use 2 of these on every seed bed. And when a valve, sort of like with your faucet, if the handle is up, it's in line with the rest of the valve, that means that it's on. When you turn it and it's sideways, that means it's off. It's always off. So here's what I'm going to do with this is, here we've got our system, and we've got this tubing, and once again, I'm going to use my butane heat, and I'm just going to barely hit that. You almost think, wow, I'm not really doing much of anything, and you really are. That's a lot of heat that comes through. Now this is also tough, and this has also got a barb on it, but it's got a lot further that I have to push this in. But it's still kind of shiny, it gets a little bit tacky, and then you just, there again, sometimes you do have to just muscle it in there as best as you can, and there you go. There we are. So now you can see there's a bump in there. That's where the tubing went over the barb, and it's pretty much up to the center of the valve. And so now it's cooling off, and it's contracted around that barb, and you're not going to get it off. So now that we have our underground system in the ground and buried, which is what we've got over here on the side, we've got our riser coming out of the ground, and we put in a valve. Okay, an on-off valve, because you're going to have multiple beds, 3 or 4, maybe up to 10, who knows, it depends on how big you want to make your garden. So now basically what I have to do is I have to put, again, another piece of this solid drip tubing onto our valve, because this then is what's going to actually go into our irrigation system that we're going to build for laying on top of our seed bed. So once again, I'm going to use the butane heat, just kind of, was that too high probably? And so now it's kind of shiny, and basically I'm going to use a little bit of muscle, and hopefully I didn't get it too hot, because that's where we have a problem, and I didn't. So good. So that worked out well. So there again. So now this little leader piece is hooked on. Again, you can see the ridge from the barb, so this is not going to go anywhere. So now what we're going to do is some more parts and pieces that I'm going to show you. This is a barbed tee, and this is going to be the next piece that we use, and then we're going to go into what are called elbows. So for each one of my above ground irrigation systems that I set up, I actually have 2 rows of irrigation line per bed. So basically, as you'll see how it goes as we create this. So again, my friend is this lighter right here. And so once again, I'm going to hit that tubing, just like that. I'm going to take my barbed tee, this one just like that, and we're going to shove that in there. There again, it does take a little muscle too, because if you get it too hard, it just goes to mush, and then you're going to have a mess. Okay, so now let me turn it this way. So there we go. Here's our tee. So the next thing that I'm going to do, and I pre-cut these with this solid tubing, and it's about 8 inches. I just sort of guess at it, but again, it's anybody's garden is going to be different. You can have it wider, closer, whatever. But I usually go about 8 inches out. So, and we're just gonna build one side of this so you can see how it's kind of coming together. So here we go with our feet, and we're going to put it into our tee. Again, muscle, and I tell you, sometimes putting these together can really give you a workout. So again, here we go. Here's our system right here, just like that. You know, maybe, yeah, it's okay. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this up so you can see what I'm doing. So now I'm going to use this elbow, and again, I'm going to warm that up, shove my elbow in here, and you know what, I'm not going to do just one side. I'm going to do both sides. I want you to see how this is coming together. So now I'm going to do a little shortcut here real quick. To make this video go a little faster, I'm going to put another elbow in. And we are going, there it is. We've got it in there. Heat up the other end real quick. And this is going to go onto our tee on the other side. Now, I think with this, there, a little bit of muscle, we got it in there. Turn this back this way. Turn our elbow this way. Okay, so now you can kind of see what we're trying to start with, or create, okay? So, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to real quick make the other end of this, and then I'm going to show you the tubing that goes in between. Okay, now, we are working on the irrigation lines that we're going to put onto our irrigation system for our garden beds. And like I had shown you before, there was the 17 millimeter solid drip tubing. Now this is a 17 millimeter inline emitter tubing. And what inline means is, you know what, let me just set this off because I have some pre-cut line already, is we have this drip line, and this is the strip line I've cut to make this mock-up irrigation system, just so you can have a general idea of how it works. But inline means that the emitter, which provides the water to the garden, is put inside the tubing. It's not one that you have to poke a hole and put an emitter on. It's actually in line, in the line. And so this one actually is an inline emitter every 1 foot of your tubing. So you've got an emitter every 12 inches. And these particular emitters put out 0.8 gallons of water an hour. So you can sort of figure out what plants you're growing and how much water that you're going to want to set your timer for to get the proper amount of water to your individual type plants. So, all right, so now what I've done for our little mock-up on our irrigation system is here's our tubing, and we're going to have a little tough time because it wants to stay curved, but I cut this little 3-foot section, and again, we're going to get our butane like we did before, and just warm it up. And there again, like I said, I warm it up because it expands and it makes it less hard to push it onto these barbed fittings. So here we go. We're going to push this on here like that. Whoop. Actually, Unfortunately, sometimes I don't get it hot enough, so we'll give it another little shot and hopefully we can get it on there. All right. Okay, now, this is one of those situations where I've goofed up, so you might as well see it, because if you do it yourself, you might goof up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to melt our line a little bit. Get it a little hotter than usual, and a lot of times when you expand it, there we go, you can get it off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this side cool, and then I'll try it on the other end. Oh, the other thing that I do too is with our drip tubing, with our inline, our holes, I try to cut it so that the holes are intermittent. Okay, so basically what I do is I get my tubing together, and I try to, like I said before, the inline tubing, you've got one every foot. So I try to cut my tubing and put it together so that they're sort of offset. So basically you've got a emitter that's here, then a foot, there's another one, another foot, there's another one. So what I try to do is on the opposite side, the opposite line, I have it about 6 inches down from the other emitters. And that way, when the water gets put on the soil and with capillary action, it makes these circles in the dry soil and they come together, and then you can cover a larger area that way. So anyway, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another attempt at putting our irrigation line, our inline tubing, onto our barbed elbow, just like this. A little pressure. Look at that. I did it right this time. And I like to, when I do this, I like to make it where the emitters are up, not down. Some people like to have it down, but I like to have it up because when I'm planting things, oftentimes I'll plant seeds or transplants right next to my emitter, and I like to see where they are. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my other line, which I want to make sure I've got it offset. I do. So I'm going to use my handy butane, just like this. Well, I bet I cut myself off, didn't I? And then I'm going to do it on this side, and I did that right. So now, without knocking the butane bottle over, I think you can kind of see how this is starting to shape up a little bit. So, my table's not big enough, but that's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put the rest of the system together, and then we'll come back. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the mock-up. I put the whole system together a little bit off camera, but I want to show you the mock-up of the irrigation system. Coming from the ground, we've got our drip line, our solid line coming from our PVC that's in the ground. We have a valve right here that turns the water on and off to our drip system, which is laying on our bed, which will basically be up about this high. But for this case, it's going to be down on this brown table, and I know it's hard to see brown on brown, but you're basically going to have brown in your soil anyway. So anyhow, so this is basically how it looks. And then I'm going to do one more thing, is I set this up with another valve and another piece of the solid drip line. And I'm going to use my butane, once again, to soften it up. I've got this last little extension of a barbed tee. I'm going to put this on there. And the reason I'm doing this, which you may think it's kind of redundant, but the reason I do it, and you can figure it out some other way, is I like to use this as a flush valve, because sometimes if you have to make a repair or when you're initially starting up your system, it's kind of nice to open up all your lines so that you can flush it out. Also, on the 3/4 inch PVC that we use as the main water delivery system underground, is at the very end of it, I like to bring it up above ground just a couple of inches, and I like to put a butterfly valve on that, which is also used as a flush valve to clean out the main line. So if the main line's cleaned out, odds are that the rest of your lines are going to be, but I open up everything, then I open up the main line, flush it out, shut it off, and then I let water run through each set of the irrigation system and then shut off the flush valve. And then the water starts coming out of the inline emitters. And so that's it. So that's your system. It's not that difficult to do, and once you get it completed, it lasts for quite a few years without needing repair or any other kind of maintenance.